Yo, what's going on, everybody? This is Nothing But Bangers, aka MBB, aka Bangers, aka we have the largest, the biggest, the most impactful update that you will probably see in Pokemon Pocket for a very long time. We've got trading, we've got leaks, we've got card previews. There's a lot going on in this video, and I'm going to help you kind of digest all of it, give you a little bit of my take on some of it, but let's get to it. So this is what we are expecting to be kind of sort of the news for this upcoming next couple of days as trading goes live on, depending on where you are in the world, the 29th. And then the news set is live on the 28th. Now, again, that just depends on your time zone, the dates. But let's kind of walk through this because there's a lot of stuff going on here. Obviously, the first thing to kind of point out is, yes, these are the two packs that we are going to see. And the space-time SmackDown set, but they also added some updates about trading. So really quickly, we'll try to run through this before we get to the new cards, and I'll kind of talk about each of those. But trading of certain cards between friends is now available. We're planning to expand the range of cards that can be traded. Trade tokens are required to trade cards of certain rarities. So like the big key point with that is you may be able to trade like lower rarity cards without trade tokens, but if you try to trade some of those EXs or certain cards, then you may have to go ahead and pay a trade token. And the only way that you can obtain trade tokens is by, well, there's actually a couple ways, but one is by consuming cards with a rarity of 3 diamonds or higher, or completing event missions. So there's a couple of ways that you can get trade tokens, but they're adding a lot of kind of things that you have to work around and prepare, so that way people aren't just making accounts and then trading things right over, right? But now the next update, and we expected this since we've seen this in the game for a while, but Pokemon tools are going to be added. And some of the Pokemon tools we'll talk about here, including one that I think we may see according to one of the leakers, even though it's not confirmed yet. But again, Pokemon tools, the way they work, you can attach one of them to your Pokemon. In other words, a Pokemon can only have one. There are some Pokemon abilities that allow you to attach more than one, but we haven't necessarily seen those in this game yet. A couple of other things too. When you go ahead and take a look at the issue fixes, there's some adjustments that were made to the auto build logic, which is really good because if you've ever used that, for some reason it's always adding stuff like Pokedex and Red Card. I don't know why necessarily, and it's also adding hand scope. It'll definitely add those cards. So maybe it'll be more fun with that, and then some adjustments were made to some of the Italian attack names. I didn't know that was an issue. But anyway, so other adjustments. This is a big one. Some adjustments were made to the way that booster pack opening results are shared in Wonder Pick. So it could be that they have found a way to address the issue where people are going into Discords and just adding friends that have opened God packs, and then they're getting the 2-star or higher cards with that. And that's kind of its own issue. I don't want to dive too much into that. I myself haven't done that at all because honestly, I just didn't really care about it. But there's a lot of people that are basically been paying for gold to buy more Wonder Pick hourglasses so that way they could take part in these Discords where people post friend codes of accounts that have just opened God packs or, cards that are 2-star or higher. 2-star. I think it's actually just 2-star. I don't even think that you can go higher. Anyway, so expect adjustments there. They may make it to where all of the things that you see in Wonder Pick are completely random now. They may limit it to no longer can you find 2 stars, which is its own thing. I have no idea how they're going to fix it, but there's going to be adjustments. Again, like some of the other adjustments that you may see are going to be like minor revisions to features and text adjustments. I don't know what that means, so won't spend too much time on that. And then new tradable cards added. So in other words, you're going to be able to trade cards from Genetic Apex and Mythical Island, and we assume that will just be limited to not 2-star or higher cards, so no crown rares and so on. But one more thing that's added is step-up battles. I haven't necessarily seen anything about what step-up battles are, but maybe it's just an event thing. I have no idea, but that's kind of interesting, right? Like a new kind of mode. And maybe step-up is code for ladder. I really don't know, but I guess we'll see when we get there. And that kind of does it for the, you know, kind of the news update that we expect to see as the 29th and the 30th hit of January, or depending where you are, you know, the 30th. But anyways, let's talk about these new cards. Okay, so just to kind of run through some of the cards that we saw previously, and now it seems like we have the complete text. This is the Leafeon, and we do believe this is the correct text. So 1 retreat, it's going to deal 90 damage for 2 energy, but it can attack next turn. It might have some play in some aggressive grass decks, but honestly, we'll just have to wait and see. Now, here is another card that we were kind of missing some information on, but it is going to be the Honchkrow with the electric weakness for 2 dark energy. It's going to be able to deal 50 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So the way it stands, you are, you know, it seems like you're going to get to pick which Pokemon you're dealing 50 damage to, and it's going to have 2 retreat cost. It could be an interesting card. Dark may be shaping up to be a pretty quick tempo deck, but you'll kind of see what I'm talking about with one of the EXs that's revealed later on. BIDOOF. So BIDOOF is something of a meme in the Pokemon community, if you don't know. And honestly, I can't wait to cook with it. I've already got a BIDOOF deck. I might show you that later on in the video, but this is the full art BIDOOF, which I'm guaranteed to be frustrated opening over and over and over again in this set. But for 60 HP and 2 energy, it's going to have the attack Super Fang, which is actually a little infamous in the trading card game. But for these 2 energies, which can be colorless, you're going to have your opponent's active Pokemon's remaining HP rounded down. So remember, the keyword there is remaining. So even though it may be a Charizard that has 180 HP, if it's at 100 HP, it's going to bring it down to 50. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're trying to like figure out like how much this is going to do. And this is not going to necessarily deal damage. It's just going to like put damage counters on, right? So one of the first things that you kind of notice that this works with is Dialga. So maybe that could be a little bit of a fun meme to play around with. But that double retreat cost is a little hefty, and it is going to have a weakness to fighting, which may be a little bit of a problem as well. Now, this is a card that's getting a lot of attention. It's called Cyrus. It's a supporter. This is one of the newer cards that's been revealed. It says switch in one of your opponent's Pokemon from their bench that has damage on it to the active spot. So in other words, if there's a Pokemon on your opponent's bench that has damage on it, you'll be able to select it with Cyrus. So there's really good synergy with this card and something like a Blizzard attack. This card, it may be, you know, a Zebstrika that's putting damage on the bench. So Pikachu does get another tool potentially. Hitmonlee also has some good synergy with Cyrus. You know, you could put 30 damage on something, then bring it out with Hitmonlee. You know, do whatever you want to it. And then things like Greninja also will have some nice synergy with Cyrus as well. So this is going to be a very interesting card. I think it's a very big addition to aggressive decks, and especially decks that can play, you know, snipers, which may include dark decks. Who knows? Another supporter that was revealed was Volkner. Now, Volkner in the in real life trading card game was actually a really good card, but the way that they've printed it for Pokemon Pocket, it's going to be choose one of your Electivire or Luxray attached to electric energy from your discard pile to that Pokemon. So it's going to pull, this is the first card that we're seeing pull energy from the discard pile, right? It's not pulling it from the energy zone. So it's a little bit limited, but it might have some synergy, especially when you read cards in the electric type that are discarding cards or discarding, you know, electric energies for their attack. So there's a little bit of synergy. And plus, remember, when you retreat, if you're paying energy, right, you will be sending electric energies to your discard pile as well. So could work a little bit like a Lieutenant Surge in some ways, except, you know, it's only for Electivire and Luxray. Maybe a little limited, so not too high on this card as of right now. So this was a card I was actually really interested to talk about and see how it worked out, because depending on how much damage it does, it's really interesting math-wise. So I'm not going to talk about the basic Pokemon in the reveal. Like, you know, honestly, they don't matter too much, except maybe like this and Ralts. But with this Riolu, you have to look at the math. So this is really interesting because Riolu going into a Pikachu EX is going to deal 40 damage. If you evolve after you attack into Lucario, remember, Lucario is going to add 20 damage to your fighting Pokemon's attack. And because of that, Riolu evolving into Lucario is actually going to put Pikachu in a knockout situation if you evolve on curve and attack on curve, right? So Riolu into Lucario, attacking both turns. If there's no potion, no blue, you're going to actually knock out that Pikachu EX. And again, so this is going to be 40 damage, right? And then here, I'll scroll back up here so you guys can see the Lucario. And then the Lucario, remember the fighting ability, 20 more damage. So you're going to deal 40, right? And you're thinking, oh, okay, so 60 damage with the weakness. But because it boosts itself, it's going to be 80 damage. So you're dealing 80 damage plus the 40 from Riolu, and you're one-shotting, or you're two-hit KOing a Pikachu EX on curve, or potentially a Pachirisu EX on curve. Now, the curveball is going to be if they have something like a cape, which we'll talk about here in a second as well. So there's some math for you. Don't get caught off guard by that if you run into fighting decks very early, which I assume they'll be pretty popular. A little bit of a budget deck, too, these fighting decks. So moving on to Weavile. So Weavile EX, or Weavile EX, however you want to pronounce it, is really fascinating for a few reasons. So one of the first things to kind of point out with this card is it's going to be a stage 1 EX that attacks for 1 energy. So if you're thinking, hey, this card's not that good, just for a second, think about how good Executor EX is, right? And I know that this card doesn't have Erica to really extend its life and, get you out of those 2-hit KO ranges. However, it does have 1 retreat cost, meaning that you can hit with it, pivot out of it, or hit twice with it, and then pivot out of it before it gets knocked out. And again, this is going to be a very big addition to dark decks, in my opinion, because it gives them the ability to have some synergy with something like a Weezing, where maybe you poison them, they take that 10 damage, or maybe you attack them and poison them, and then Weavile comes in there, however you want to pronounce it again, and then maybe cleans it up with a 2-hit KO. So a little bit of synergy there with Weavile EX and Weezing, and then again with cards like Honchkrow, you may be putting damage on the bench, so that way you can go ahead and maybe use Cyrus to bring it out and then KO it with Weavile. There's a lot of different things that you can do. Dark decks, pretty interesting. I'm not sure necessarily how good they are, though. Just kind of looking across the meta, we're just going to have to play with these cards. Speaking of dark Pokemon, so this is the Darkrai that we've seen revealed. It's not an EX. It's a basic with 110 HP. It is weak to grass, much like the Weavile. And when you take a look at the attack, it's going to deal 60 damage for 3 energy and put the Pokemon to sleep. So sort of like a miniature Wigglytuff, and if you've played with Wigglytuff, you know that Wigglytuff can be pretty good. The only thing that kind of concerns me is it is a little expensive, for only 60 damage. So, I don't know that this card will be played very much. Maybe it has some wills in the no EX format, or maybe in some restrictive formats, but, in the open format where EXs are allowed and everything, I don't know that this card is going to see very much play. Now, getting to the Gallade EX. So the Gallade EX, by the way, the full art looks tremendous. This is going to be 170 HP stage 2. It's going to evolve from Kirlia, and we do have a new Kirlia and Ralts that I'll probably take a look at here in a second too. For 2 energy, it's going to deal 70 damage plus 20 more for each energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. So you're looking at 70 damage at least, maybe 90. If they have 4 energies on their Pokemon, then hey, you may be looking at 150. It is going to have a weakness to Psychic, but it only has a retreat cost of 1 energy. So, take that for what you will. It's got a lot of comparisons to a Machamp EX, and I'm not sure which one I think is better, Machamp EX or Gallade EX. They do sort of different things, right? And then obviously Machamp is going to be static damage like all the time, and Gallade damage is going to fluctuate. Also, Gallade is cheaper, so that kind of helps, and maybe that allows you to play some other cards along with it. But it is worth noting that this will have synergy with something like a Lucario. So with Lucario, your base damage could be increased to 90. And so 90 plus 4 energy on your opponent's attack would be 170 points of damage, which would be very solid and be able to KO almost everything in the game. So very interesting to see how that shapes out. But again, a stage 2 attacker, kind of rough. We'll see how it plays out. So this is Gabite, which is going to evolve into Garchomp, and you'll notice right away that it does have water and fighting energy, and that will be the same for the Garchomp. Now, typically I don't talk about the stage 1s, but this card is a little interesting, being that it is going to be, that dual energy type for the attack. So maybe not going to be so hot, but the Garchomp is definitely an interesting card. However, it does have some weaknesses of its own. But there is the Gabite. I know a lot of people were kind of wondering and speculating, you know, that, hey, it would probably have that water and fighting energy cost. Ralts. So this is the new Ralts, and I think it is a direct upgrade to the previous Ralts because it's going to be able to defend itself against being Sabrinaed out into the active, and you're not going to have to pay an energy to retreat it. You're just going to be able to attach an energy and then teleport out of there. So you get to keep that energy, and if you've played Gardevoir and Mewtwo at all, you know that sometimes having one energy on your Gardevoir can set it up later to attack for 60 damage, which can be very handy. And then if you're playing Gallade, well, because it's a colorless cost, you don't mind playing those fighting energies, right? Even though you're playing psychic Pokemon, and being able to kind of build off of that. And also we're noting that because it is a psychic type, Mythical Slab will have some synergy with it. So there could be a world where you're playing Gallade and Mew EX along with Mythical Slab. So keep that in mind as you're trying to cook up some spice. The Kirlia also has a colorless attack. This Kirlia, I believe, is a direct upgrade as well. Although the damage output is lower, it is able to attack for 1 energy, and it is going to be a colorless energy, so that's huge. But I do think that you will probably play this new Ralts and this new Kirlia in the Gardevoir decks as well as the Gallade decks. Then we've got Infernape EX, and if you don't look close enough, you will not realize that this has free retreat. So free retreat for a stage 2, pretty fascinating. However, 170 HP, and it's going to deal 140 damage, but it's going to discard all the fire energies attached to it. So more than likely, this is going to be a finisher, or it's going to be a card where you attack with it, and then next turn you free retreat out of that into another attacker to start chipping away at whatever they just sent in. But again, it is going to discard all fire energy, so even if you ramp with Moltres and you get more than 2 energy, ultimately it won't matter. So something to kind of keep in mind. I'm not sure how I feel about this card, but the free retreat is really interesting, and maybe there's something to the fact that it does deal 140, which is pretty solid. But again, you know, the big stickler is going to be, man, it's another fired attacker that has to discard its energy. So apparently we will be seeing reprints of Magnemite and Magneton, and because of that, we are going to see a Magnezone as well. This Magnezone has 140 HP, and for 1 electric energy as well as 2 colorless energy, it's going to be able to deal 110, but you will have to discard 1 electric energy. The retreat cost is 2. It has a weakness to fighting. Very interesting Pokemon. You know, Magneton can ramp itself up, so and then set you up for a Magnezone, so that's some nice synergy. Maybe it's playable, but again, it's going to be a stage 2 attacker, so you know, those are a little iffy unless they're really, really good. But hey, could be interesting. In the no EX format, it seems like fighting Pokemon are going to be really good, so I don't know that this really has a place in either the open format or in no EX. But hey, we're going to get to cook with it, and maybe it turns out better than expected. Now, Manaphy is a Pokemon really fascinating. Basic Pokemon, 50 HP, so really glassy. But for 1 energy, it can basically choose 2 of your bench Pokemon. For each of those Pokemon, take a water energy from your energy zone and attach it to that Pokemon. It's worth noting that this is going to be able to ramp any of your Pokemon on your bench, right? So even if it's a Mew, that's a Mew EX, that's a psychic type, it's going to be able to attach water energy to it. This is going to have good synergy with Palkia EX as well, and then a plethora of other water types that are obviously going to be really costly attackers. So Manaphy may have a really interesting place in the meta. And one thing to kind of think about, because we do have a tool card that we'll talk about in a second that gives you 20 more HP, there is potential that, hey, Manaphy gets you 1 or 2 ramps and basically speeds up your ability to start attacking with your big, bulky Pokemon faster. The trade-off may be that you're giving up 1 point because Manaphy is so glassy. So will be interesting to see how to cook with this card. I'm pretty interested in cooking with it. I'm not going to lie to you. But again, I'm not necessarily sold that it's going to be extremely good, but it does have potential. You just got to worry about that glassy body, right? But again, how many things are going to be dealing 50 damage as early as, you know, their turn 2 or, you know, their turn 3? So we'll see how that goes. This is the Garchomp. that we also will be seeing. It has 140 HP, Dragon type, no weakness, 1 retreat cost. The ability is going to be very interesting because you must discard a card from your hand in order to use this ability. Once per turn, you may draw a card. So you're basically ditching a card to draw a card and kind of cycle through your deck faster. For 1 water and 1 fighting, you're going to deal 100 damage, so not bad. With Cynthia, you could push that up to 150 damage, so very strong. I do think that there is potential to cook with this, but again, man, those dual energy types are always a little scary. Maybe this pairs well with something like a Greninja. You know, that's a potential partner with it, but again, that's playing 2 stage 2s, and generally speaking, you don't want to do that. So we'll see how Garchomp turns out. In the no EX format, again, things like Golem seem like they're going to kind of just dominate this, but we'll see. Maybe Garchomp is able to attack a little bit faster, and that's why Garchomp ends up being relevant in no EX formats. Porygon-Z. So this is a really trippy Pokemon. For 3 colorless energy, it deals 80 damage, and you're going to get to choose the next energy that your opponent generates. So you're going to be able to sabotage their energy, potentially, which is kind of crazy, right? The other thing is that it has 140 HP, but it does have a retreat cost of 2 colorless and a weakness to fighting. Porygon-Z, kind of interesting. I'm not sure that it's going to see very much play, but it's a very unique card. And, you know, the Porygon 2 is kind of decent, but, you know, obviously nothing that really stands out. I think it has an attack for like 20 or 30 damage, maybe 40, but nothing crazy. And then Togekiss. Togekiss has 140 HP. For 2 Psychic Energy, it's going to deal 60 damage. During your next turn, this Pokemon's Overdrive Smash is going to deal 60 more damage. So this has the potential to deal 170 damage when you combine it with Cynthia and you successfully attack with it without it getting like switched out of the active. Because I believe if you switch this out of the active, it's going to reset the attack. So if you get Sabrina or Cyrus, I believe it's going to reset the attack. But fascinating card, weakness to steel, 1 retreat cost, maybe has some potential with something like a cape that it will increase its HP to 160. It stays out of range of being one-shot by Mewtwo EX, which is huge. But again, we're going to have to cook with this, and we'll see. I mean, hey, Cynthia, this card, not bad. But again, this is a stage 2, and then you need Cynthia. So, you know, that's a lot of cards to bring together one decent card. Rotom. So this is Rotom. There may be multiple versions of Rotom. I don't know, depending on like the form and whatnot. But this Rotom is going to have 70 HP. It's going to be an electric type. For 1 colorless, it's going to deal 20 damage. And if your opponent's active Pokemon has a tool attached to it, it does 30 more. Weakness to fighting and 1 retreat cost. This is a pretty fascinating card. And if Pokemon tools really become a big part of the meta, maybe this takes a spot in a Pikachu EX deck as being kind of like one of those Pokemon that can threaten 50 damage for 1 energy. That's pretty good. And it's only a 1 prizer. So maybe that works out in Pikachu decks or maybe Pachirisu decks. We will see how the meta kind of shapes out. But right off the bat, I'm not sure that it's going to be very good right away. But it may need the meta to take shape before it becomes actually relevant. Also worth noting that you can splash this into a lot of decks, right? Because it's got that colorless attack. So keep that in mind. And then Staraptor, this is going to be a stage 2 with 140 HP. For 3 energy, it's going to deal 80, but it's going to make it to where your opponent can't retreat. So think of like Arbok, right? That's basically what it's going to be doing here. Or think of like Galvantula. That's what it's going to be doing here. It's got a weakness to electric, speaking of Galvantula, and then a retreat cost of 1 colorless. Decent card. I don't know that I'm going to play with this card very much at all, if at all, right? All right, so this is a very important card. You're going to see a lot of this card in aggro decks and stall walls. Like, this is going to be a really interesting card and an aggravating card to go up against. It may even have the potential to force some ties. This is going to be a Pokemon tool. If this card is attached to, is in the active spot, right? If the Pokemon that this card is attached to is in the active spot and it's damaged by an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, you do 20 damage to the attacking Pokemon. So, in other words, hey, if you attack my Farfetch'd and I have Rocky Helmet on it, I'm going to deal 20 damage to you. And then on my turn, if my Farfetch'd is still alive, I'm going to hit you for 40 more damage, right? And then if you attack my Farfetch'd again, now you're going to take another 20 damage from Rocky Helmet. So for 1 energy in Rocky Helmet, And Farfetch'd, I may deal 80 damage to you with just my Farfetch'd. Insane, right? Not only that, this has some weird interactions with a card like Marshadow. If you attack a Pokemon that has Rocky Helmet and it gets knocked out because of the recoil from the Rocky Helmet, your Marshadow is not going to trigger, right? Because it's not hit by an opponent's Pokemon attack, it's hit by a card effect, right? So there's a lot of tricky things with Rocky Helmet, and I expect to see a lot of it. And hey, maybe it even has some merit to being played with something like a Dialga, right? Maybe it has some merit to being played with something like a Venusaur, right? There's a lot of things. Hey, maybe it even has legs being played with something like an Exeggutor EX that takes a lot of hits and, healing to, usually pump it up for more turns. Very troublesome card. I expect to see a lot of Rocky Helmet. Lum Berry. I don't expect to see a lot of this card. I do think that we may see a berry that heals damage counters, but this Pokemon tool is only going to remove special conditions. So at the end of each turn, it's going to check, and if there's a status condition, you're going to discard this, and it's going to heal your Pokemon from whatever status conditions it has. So cool card. I don't know that it's going to see very much play right now. Giant Cape. Another really insane Pokemon tool card. And honestly, it's going to fit really well in some decks. Spoiler alert, Magikarp and Giant Cape were match made in heaven. You thought we were running away from the giant sea snake. You thought that the Zebstrika technology was going to be enough to keep those Magikarps and Gyaradoses at bay. And then they said, hey, how about we put Giant Cape out there and let you put that on your Magikarp? So now you have to Zebstrika it twice, right? Your Magikarp, you'd have to Zebstrike, hit it twice, and then hope they don't evolve it, right? So, Giant Cape, I think it's going to be a very good card in some of these Pokemon decks. I could see it being played in grass decks. I could see it being played in, a lot of decks, just to be honest. Obviously, Pachirisu EX as well. I could see it being played in Articuno 18 trainer or 17 trainer, depending on if you're playing Palkia in Articuno, however you want to, mix that up. But Giant Cape, really, really good card. I do think that we'll see it be played a lot. And this is an Eevee that they almost had me, chat. They almost had me. For a second, I thought that they were giving us the Eevee that says if you attach an energy, you search your deck for a Pokemon that shares that type of the energy and you put it onto Eevee. I thought that was the Eevee we were getting because that's what it is in the TCG. Turns out they just used the artwork, the same artwork, and this Pokemon has no ability, just an attack. 60 HP for 1 energy, quick attack, deals 10 damage, and maybe 20 more if you flip heads. So still looking for that bomb Eevee that, attaches energy and then evolves or searches evolutions, but seems like we're not going to get it in this set. So the last few cards that I'll talk about are a little bit blurry in their promos. So we're not sure if they're going to be automatically included in the set or they're going to be like new cards of the version that's already in the set, or like, we're not really sure when these are going to come out. They may be in the original set and then just get new artwork, because sometimes they do that, or they may withhold 1 or 2 of these cards from the main set and, give us the new version as a promo. But these are promos and the pictures are blurry, and there's one that's very controversial. But this is the Electivire that will work with Volkner. It's going to have 120 HP. It's going to be a stage 1 for 2 energy. It seems like it deals 40 plus, and the effect says if this Pokemon has at least 2 more energy that are electric types attached, this is going to deal 80 more damage. So maybe 120 damage. It's not an EX, but man, that retreat cost being 3 is kind of expensive. Not sure how I feel about this card yet, but again, Volkner has some good synergy because it's just going to be able to bring back those electric energies, right, and keep dealing 120. So could be kind of nasty, but we'll just have to wait and see. And hey, remember, Lieutenant Surge works with Electabuzz. So there's a world where you Lieutenant Surge your Electabuzz and then slap down Electivire and start going to town for 120 damage. This is a MISDREVEUS, 60 HP basic, Confuse Ray. And why am I talking about a basic Pokemon when I've skipped the other starter basic Pokemons and Togepi? Because we are officially confirmed to have Confusion. The big question is, what is Confusion going to do, right? Is Confusion going to be flip a coin, if tails, your attack fails, and you deal 20 or 30 damage to yourself? And if you flip heads, your attack is successful. Like, what is confusion going to be? We're kind of still waiting on that, but I can tell you this. In the paper trading card game, confusion was extremely annoying. So we'll see how this plays out if we get more confusion cards. Obviously, the text right here on Pokemon Zone has yet to be updated. They still have heavy impact, so that's from, Dialga. But Confuse Ray says your opponent's Pokemon is now confused, and it doesn't have any damage that it does. But again, big news here. We officially have confusion. Then the last promo, arguably the most intriguing promo, Skarmory. 80 HP for 1 energy. It does the attack Metal Arms, which says 20 plus. Now here's where it gets tricky. Because these pictures are absolutely awful and we can't tell what it does, we're not sure if this does 30 damage, 20 damage, 80 damage, or 70 damage, or 90 damage. Like, we have no clue, right? Because the effect apparently reads, if this Pokemon has a Pokemon tool attached, this attack does X more damage. In my opinion, there's no way that it's 90. There's no way that it's 70, because that's way too good, right? Like, that's just my thoughts. But I'm open to see what happens. It's got a weakness to electric and 1 retreat cost. But again, like, if this card legitimately says 70 damage, that's insane. If it says 90 damage, that's insane. I mean, we're talking about putting almost every entire Pokemon in the game on a 2-turn clock as early as your turn 2, or your turn 1 if you go second, right? So again, I think that would be way too good. I don't think that they would make something that oppressive, but I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see, and hopefully get a better picture sooner rather than later. So these are just a few deck ideas that I've already kind of got brewing. Maybe you can cook something a little bit better, but hopefully I get a chance to play these cards at midnight when the new set comes out. But this is kind of a little bit of a take on the new fighting deck, adding Lucario and Riolu, as well as Rocky Helmet and Cyrus. So there's some good synergy with Hitmonlee and Cyrus. And then obviously on curve, Riolu into Lucario can deal with a lot of things in the electric type. Then you got your double Giovanni. Again, hey, you may want to move around some cards. Maybe you think a basic Pokemon is too many. You can play around with that. But here's just kind of like an early draft. Could be really fun. Hey, you can always kind of cook your own little fighting deck as well. This is a new take on the Gyarados deck. I think that the cape, right, giant cape on Magikarp is going to help tremendously. And then if they choose not to ever, chip the Magikarp because maybe they don't want to, or they can't, or they just kind of like don't want to use the Zebstrika attack on it, your Gyarados is going to have 200 HP. That's insane. Then when you take a look at Druddigon and Palkia, I do think that there's some synergy with Leaf as well as Rocky Helmet. And then you still have those Misty High Rolls. There's a lot of potential there. But I think, you're losing Greninja, so that might make the Mewtwo matchup a little tricky, especially if they're playing something like Giant Cape to make their Mewtwo's really thick at 170 HP. But I do like the look of this Gyarados deck. Gyarados is definitely not dead. And in my opinion, Cape gave it a big boost. Another deck that I was kind of playing around with was Pachirisu. And then it's got the Mew EX as kind of like an alternate attacker. And then the Zebstrika as kind of a sniper. There's not a lot of room in this deck. Maybe you take out the Mews and you play more supporters. I really am not sure what to do with this deck. And then here's another curveball. If we get Focus Band, because one of the leakers has said that Focus Band could potentially be in this set. If you don't know what Focus Band does, it's a tool. If your Pokemon is knocked out by an opponent's attack, you can flip a coin. If heads, your Pokemon survives with 10 HP on it. So even if it's on the bench and it gets, sniped or whatever by an attack, if you flip heads, it may still survive. So there's a lot of potential with Focus Band, and then it would give you 6 tools to work with Pachirisu, which I think would be a pretty good number to make sure your Pachirisu is always dealing at least 80 damage. So there's a little bit of a cook there, but hey, we'll have to wait and see. Maybe Mew EX is no good. Maybe you just put Pachirisu into Pikachu and call it a day. Another deck that I was really fascinated by is this Greninja Farfetch'd deck list that's playing Cyrus and Rocky Helmet, right? So basically you're punishing your opponent for attacking you. And then you're also, you know, basically saying, hey, if you retreat and try to pivot, I do have my Cyrus ready to bring that Pokemon back out and hopefully finish it off. There's a lot of ways that you could play this. You could play this with a Palkia. You could play this with Fighting Energies and add Hitmonlee, one Hitmonlee, one Marshadow. Heck, you could play Tauros, you could play Mew. There's a lot of different ways. You may even move some trainers out of this deck, like a Giovanni, right? But this is just like an early idea that I want to be able to cook with as soon as the set drops. And I do think that it probably has some pretty good potential, especially if you can keep it a one prize deck, right? Like that might have some wheels to it. And then lastly, I got to end the video with some BIDOOF. So this is the last deck that I can't wait to troll people with. Is going to be a BIDOOF deck. So basically the idea is that you're using Dialga EX to generate energy onto your BIDOOF. You bring the BIDOOF in, you have their Pokemon's HP, and again, like you already dealt 30 to it in a perfect world, and now you're bringing it down half. After that, you subtract that 30, and hopefully Greninja and Farfetch'd can kind of combo to finish it off. And, you know, hey, you've also got something like a Rocky Helmet to help also put more damage on it, right? So I think this is a cute deck. I don't know that it's going to be any good at all, but man, why not cook with BIDOOF, right? Have some fun while you're enjoying the new cards. Personally, I can't wait. I hope you've enjoyed my breakdown of these cards and some different ideas on how we may play these cards. I hope you guys come back for more content. I will be live streaming when the set drops at midnight and having some fun with some new decks. I can't wait to share that time with you guys. And again, thank you for taking time out of your day for me to be background noise, entertainment. Maybe you learned something. But as always, thank you so much. And until next time, peace.